Hello students, welcome to another edition of Maths lesson with Mr. Salim. Today we'll be touching on word problems on addition and subtraction. Let's get it on. Okay, here we have a word problem. Let's start by reading the word problem. At a book fair, Davian sold 340 books. Chanel sold 460 more books than Davian. How many books did Chanel sell? Let's start with understand. Who were the ones selling at the book fair? So who was selling at the book fair? Did you say Davian and Chanel? Well done. You are correct. Let's move on to the next one. Who sold fewer books? Is it Davian or Chanel? Did you say Davian? Well done. That is correct. Let's move on. So how many fewer books did Davian sell than Chanel? I think for this question, we will have to work out the difference. Yes, it is already mentioned here. So, since Chanel sold 460 more books than Davian, therefore, we can also say Davian sold 460 lesser or fewer books than Chanel. So the answer is 460 fewer books. Well done. Let's go on. Okay, next up we have choose. So we have to choose an appropriate heuristic. What do you think would be appropriate for us to use in this question? Would it be working backwards? Would it be model drawing? Or could it be guess and check? Did you say model drawing? Well done, you're correct. Let's try it out. So first we have Davian. Now Davian has sold how many books again? Yes, you're right, 340 books. So we'll have a bar to represent that and to label it as 340 books. How about Chanel? How much more did Chanel sold? Do we know how much Chanel has? Yeah, we don't. So we do know that Chanel sold more. So would the bar be longer or shorter than Davian's bar here? Yes, it has to be longer because she sold 460 more books. Okay, so there you have it. The bar is longer, Chanel's bar is longer, and the excess of 460 books is also labeled here. So what are we finding out? What is the question asking us to find out? Yes, it is to find out how many books did Chanel sell. Okay, let's move on. Oh, by the way, this is a comparison model. So take note, this is how a comparison model looks like. You have one value on top of the other, stacked on top of each other for you to compare. So there must be a difference in value. For example, Chanel has more books sold than Davian. So therefore Chanel is stacked on top. So you can compare it with Davian with a shorter bar and it is stacked on top of each other. So this is called a comparison model. Note of this. Okay, let's carry it out. So first you have at 340 with 460. Why is that so? Yes, because we're trying to find how many books Chanel sold. And since Chanel sold 460 more books than Davian, it makes sense for us to add them up. As you can see from the bar, if this part, so this part which is represented in yellow, will cover up this part in blue. So if this part here up to here is 340 and this part here is 460, when you add the two parts together, you will get the total amount of books that Chanel sold, which is 800. That's right. And that all? So we have to do our working at the side here. There's our orthogonal working at the side here. And there's one more thing that we need to carry out. Oh yes, the answer statement. So you need to write it down. Chanel sold 800 books. Done. Let's move on. Next up, we have checked. So finally, when you finish your work, it's very important that you check, make sure that you've done it correctly. How do we do that? Well, start with, is my answer reasonable? So could 800 be a reasonable answer? Well, 800 is more than the values here. Does it make sense? Yes, it has to be more than the values here because Chanel sold is much more. It cannot be a smaller number. It cannot be a smaller value. Let's go backwards to check the answer. Okay, let's try it out. So you have 800. If you were to subtract 800 with 340, what would you get? Let's work it out. You get 460. Alright, so it makes sense. So you have done working backwards to check in. So it will triangle back to the original values that we have received from the earlier part we've been looking at from the question. Okay, this one. Yes, do I add or subtract? So was it correct to say that I add? What happens if I subtract? Does that make sense? It does not make sense to subtract because Chanel sold more. So if you were to subtract this, you are telling yourself that Chanel actually sold lesser. So it doesn't make sense. Okay, let's move on. My answer should be greater than 460. Yes or no? Yes. Why? Yeah, because if it is lesser than 460, then it's definitely not more than what Davian has. Because we mentioned that Davian sold 340 and Chanel sold 460, more than what Davian has. So it cannot be just 460. It has to be more than that. It cannot be 340. It has to be more than that. So you have to add both of them together. Therefore, the sum of 340 and 460 is 800. And we did this just now to triangulate back to the previous question. So these are all steps that you should be looking at in checking. This is not simply just looking at your answer and just going through it passively. You have to work it out. You have to check in if you can get the same values again. Or in this case, you can subtract with another value from the answer to see if you can get one of the other values that was given at the start of the question. Okay, sounds good. Let's move on. And finally, we'll decide, yes, that's the correct answer. Okay, this question, I will be looking at having it during our lesson. So have a quick teaser of this is the question that we'll be looking at. And I hope it is something that you could solve. So let's do one last recap. What are the steps again in solving a word problem question? Start off with, yes, understand. You have to understand the question. Make sure you read it once and twice. Underline, circle the numbers, underline the keywords. Try to make sense of it. Next one, you choose the correct heuristic that you want to use. Okay, whether it's model drawing, working backwards, and so on. These are the things that you use to check, to make sure that you choose the correct heuristic. And finally, carrying out, solving the question, doing your working by making sure your model is there if you are doing model drawing, making sure the heuristic that you choose is clearly seen, and you have to make sure that your answer statement is there as well. And finally, yes, check. You have to check your answer by working it out backwards, looking at different ways to solve it, questioning yourself whether the answer makes sense, whether your working makes sense, and so on. Okay, that concludes today's video. I will see you again in class. Thank you very much.